Is there anybody out there? And if there is, what does that mean for us? We often see ourselves as a superior species, that humans are the dominant intelligence. We believe that we're singular, special, exceptional even. But what if we aren't? What would the implications be for humanity if intelligent life is discovered somewhere in the cosmos? I'm Soraya Salam, and this is the Doha Debates podcast.
We used to joke when I was a postdoc at a NASA research center, and there were some stories out there about, NASA's detected extraterrestrial life, but they're keeping it secret. No way anybody would have any motivation or would obey any command or any ability to keep a secret like that.
So jinn are, in Islamic theology, they are an intelligent being that inhabits Earth. So they're cryptoterrestrials, not extraterrestrials. And they have interactions with human beings.
Imagine we had a spacecraft entering the solar system. Even if they were not sending out any radio messages or any light signals, if you're not communicating at all, it can actually sort of make you appear even more suspicious, or potentially even more threatening.
Let's suppose that we were visited by another civilization and they come here and their craft gets impacted by a lot of our debris, and then they say to themselves, hey, this planet's got a kind of defensive shield and they've just wiped out. We were coming here to do a peaceful first contact and they've just destroyed our ship because they've got all these particles orbiting at high speed and they've just ripped us up.
Our question today: if we discover that we are not the most intelligent species, what does that mean for us? I'd like to introduce our guests. Shaykh Hamza Karamali is the founder of Basira Education. Matthias Determann is a historian at Virginia Commonwealth University in Qatar, specializing in the history of science.
Thank you.
David Grinspoon is an astrobiologist at the Planetary Science Institute and is working with NASA.
Thanks.
And Nick Pope has investigated UFOs, now known as UAPs, for the UK Ministry of Defence.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us today. Nick, I want to start with you. For decades, when people talked about intelligent life beyond Earth, they used the phrase extraterrestrial intelligence. But over the last few years, governments, especially in the US, have stopped using that term, and they use the phrase now nonhuman intelligence. What does that mean? Why the switch? And do you believe in its existence?
Well, I think non-human intelligence originated with one of the many whistleblowers who have come forward out of the US intelligence community. And this particular one is David Grush. And he introduced the term in one of the many congressional hearings that we've had about this. And he used the phrase non-human intelligence, or NHI, precisely to get away from the idea that this was perhaps extraterrestrial. And he said, well, that's just one of a number of competing theories. But what if we're dealing with something else, something other than ourselves, but an intelligence that might be from another dimension, from a different time, or that even might be something demonic, or might be something that we just simply don't have the words or the concepts to describe or understand, unless we thought there was something almost literally magical in a Harry Potter sense about Earth, and clearly there isn't. The factors that gave rise to life here should replicate elsewhere. If there's life here, there's probably life elsewhere, and some of it, in a universe nearly 14 billion years old, is probably going to be smarter than us.
Given that you investigated UFO sightings, or UAP, which you can explain why the switch in that language, have you ever had a personal experience with these beings?
I've never seen anything unusual myself, but I have investigated hundreds of cases for the British government. We changed the terminology. We talked about extraterrestrial to NHI. We changed from UFO to UAP to get away from the pop culture baggage that the term UFO had acquired over the years. It was just associated with science fiction and conspiracy theory. And again, we felt that that was unhelpful. So we changed, not necessarily for the public and the media, but really internally in the Ministry of Defense, to get this subject taken more seriously, to UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena, and now the US government has changed it again to unidentified anomalous phenomena.
David, do you believe in the existence of non-human intelligence?
I think when we use the word intelligent, we have to think deeply about what we mean. And if we're not just referring to humans and considering other life in the universe, then we can look at other life on Earth and try to put our own intelligence in that context. So obviously there's non-human intelligence even on this planet. And
but superior to our own?
What do we mean by superior? If we're looking at sort of a linear scale, can I say that cetaceans are not superior to humans? It's an interesting question. It depends on what you mean by that. But I think what you're getting at is the question of intelligence elsewhere in the universe that has developed far beyond what our capabilities here, and certainly I believe that that's almost inevitably exists. Have I seen evidence that that confirms that? No. Am I open to finding it? Absolutely. And in fact, I very much want to.
I don't know if you can answer this, but have your colleagues at NASA ever experienced non-human intelligence? Or
I can't answer that definitively, and the answer is no.
Matthias, what about you?
It is very likely that an advanced extraterrestrial civilization would not just be a biological civilization, but would also be a technological, high-tech civilization. And in fact, researchers in the field of the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, or SETI, are not just looking for biosignatures, they're also looking for technosignatures. And just like our own civilization has only sent robotic spacecraft to other planets so far because of problems with cosmic rays on biological systems, it is possible, it is maybe even likely that other biological beings would have also sent out robotic spacecraft first before they would have sent biological beings to other planets or star systems.
Shaykh Hamza, when you hear someone like Nick say that the switch to the phrase non-human intelligence is a recognition of the potential of multidimensional beings, maybe demonic beings, does that surprise you to hear that?
No, I mean, so there's in Indonesia, there's a UFO sighting community there since the 1950s. And Indonesia is a Muslim country, and so they tried to look at how to reconcile what they're observing with their religious commitments. And so they put forward a number of different hypotheses, and one of the hypotheses is called the jinn hypothesis. So jinn are, in Islamic theology, they are an intelligent being that inhabits Earth. So they're cryptoterrestrials, not extraterrestrials. And they have interactions with human beings. So I think that the UFO, UAP problem, when it's approached from a defense perspective, then we're looking at these phenomena. We're trying to figure out how to protect our national security against threats from a possibly aggressive country, other kinds of weapons. So from a religious perspective, the Prophet ﷺ, the Prophet Muhammad, it was he taught us to be conscious of the existence of jinn. These beings, they have, there's stories that are told in our literature about abductions. They take on different forms. They have advanced technologies. They're mentioned in the Quran as the Prophet Solomon. He had control over them. So they were great builders. They had an association with water. A lot of UFO sightings are associated with water. So I appreciate the widening of extraterrestrial to non-human, because I think like that's where I would suspect. But it's a hypothesis. I mean, it needs further exploration.
But beyond jinn and beyond what's in Islamic literature, do you believe in the possibility of life on other planets, on other intelligent beings that exist beyond humans and jinn?
I think it is a possibility. I think scientists will tell us about that. I think so in the Muslim scholarly tradition, I appreciated what David said about scientists following the evidence. So religion is often painted as being something that's based on faith or an emotional thing, search for meaning and awe. But in Muslim scholarly tradition, we believe that our religious commitments need to be based on evidence. So when I look at it from a theological perspective, then the existence of extraterrestrial intelligent life is a possibility. It falls within the power of God to create something like that.
Nick, I'm wondering why this conversation has entered the mainstream in the past several years, in the past decade. Why are governments suddenly so urgently investing money into this kind of research?
Well, I think the center of gravity of this undeniably is coming from the United States at the moment. We've had whistleblowers coming forward, former government employees speaking to the reality of this. But I think it's the congressional engagement that is really moving this forward. There have been classified briefings behind closed doors, but also open public hearings. There have been UAP-related provisions in successive National Defense Authorization Acts over the last 3, 4, 5 years now. Now that's
but why?
I realized when I answer that I'm giving you the what, but I'm not really giving you the why. The honest answer is I don't know why. The suspicion, I think, is that maybe they know or strongly suspect something, or that this is just a conversation that's time has come for it. I think if future historians look back, and if we get across that line, and I don't know how it will happen. The UFO community or UAP community talk about disclosure. The Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence Committee might pick up a signal, or we might detect a techno signature, or we might have, something out of science fiction, like the archetypal landing on the White House lawn. But future historians will look back on that moment, however this transpires, and they will say there was the day before and then there was the day after. But I think the only safe prediction is to say that it will be deeply impactful for almost everyone.
David, what does the day after look like if humanity discovers evidence of non-human intelligence?
I think the day after will probably shake us, maybe in good ways. And I think in detail, it will depend on the nature of that discovery. Because, for instance, if we detect a technosignature out there that isn't somebody trying to message us, but it's just pretty solid evidence that there's somebody out there that's constructed something or modified a planet in some way, so we know that, this isn't the work of bacteria, or it's not a natural planetary manifestation, it's a technological development, that would be really interesting, and it would give us this realization that we're not unique in some way that we thought we might be. And I think that it's been said that would have this sort of uniting effect on the human race, which I like to think could happen.
Matthias, what do you think would be the impact on humanity, on our sense of self, culture, identity, if this intelligent life is discovered?
I would agree with David here. It depends on the nature of the finding. If we find evidence of an advanced spacefaring civilization, so a civilization that would have mastered interstellar travel, then it would put our own civilization very much in perspective. It would make us feel very small. It would make us feel, in many ways, less special. Or at the very least, it would make us rethink how special we could still be.
Sheikh Hamza, do you agree? Would it make you feel less small, less special if non-human intelligence or extraterrestrial life was discovered?
Feeling less special, that assumes that I feel like I'm special. So the uniqueness and specialness of human beings does not come from their being alone in the universe, but the uniqueness and specialness of human beings comes from their moral responsibility to God. There's a famous hadith from the Prophet ﷺ that there are other earths like this earth, and each earth has an Adam like your Adam, and a Jesus like your Jesus, and a Muhammad like your Muhammad. And so it was. Historical critics didn't accept this as a verified statement of the Prophet ﷺ.
Would they have received the same message?
The message is the messages that God sends. So there's a shared message that everybody has, and this shared message has to do with facts and realities. So facts and realities don't change. So God's existence is a fact and reality. Resurrection after death is a fact and reality. Judgment is a fact and reality. We do have a uniqueness. We do have a distinction, because when I look at the theological evidence alongside the scientific evidence, then there is a distinction that was given to mankind. So the immediate purport of the revelatory evidence is that human beings have a specialness in relation to God, but that specialness is not absolute, it's conditional, and it's also responsibility. The Prophet ﷺ in the Quran, it says that God sent him as a mercy. It's interesting. It says we sent you as a mercy to all of the alameen, to all of the worlds. So if the intelligent extraterrestrial life is discovered, I'd be very interested in getting to know them, understanding their language, and seeing what information they have, and conveying the message of the Prophet ﷺ to them, just as we do to the rest of mankind.
That assumes that they're willing to listen and peaceful.
Yeah, I'm optimistic.
Yeah,
I mean, why do we always have to make like a nightmare
Do you
scenario?
think at least it would be possible that the prophets have also spoken to them, and that we could learn something from them on these topics?
It's possible that they received prophets. They would have specific commands that might differ, but the commands of the Prophet Muhammad would supersede those. So we would now be obligated to meet them and communicate with them.
Why is this so intriguing to talk about? Why have we been fascinated with this topic for decades, whether it's in pop culture or whether it's, at the office of the Ministry of Defense? What is it about us that is so fascinated with this topic?
Well, I mentioned earlier, it's one of the big questions we can ask ourselves as humans. Are we alone or not in the universe? Humans have always looked up at the night sky since the dawn of time and looked with wonder and hope and sometimes fear too, and wondered what might be out there. But I think it's the search for meaning. That's my answer to your question.
Mm-hmm. I think there's something, to me, it seems like if I were to look at the human species as a little vulnerable thing on a little vulnerable speck in the universe where there's black holes and there's these terrifying realities that if human beings went up, they wouldn't even survive that. Then am I alone? Am I alone in this big, huge kind of thing? It seems to me, it makes me scared. I think that there is an existential aloneness that comes from a naturalistic view of the universe. But when there is and this isn't to justify the existence of God or not. Like, I think that needs to be justified separately based on an argument. But a perspective where everything is dependent on a being who is controlling everything and running everything and has given me a purpose and a meaning. Now I don't feel that fear anymore. I feel like I'll be taken care of. I feel I have a direction. I feel like I know where to go. So now the search for extraterrestrial life, it is interesting. It's fascinating. It's something that is, it's unproven imagination, and maybe we're probing all of these things because we're being pushed by this existential loneliness that comes from a naturalistic worldview.
Well, there's an interesting point. I just wanted to say that there are two forces pulling in opposite directions here. We always, on an individual level, many people fear being alone. I think that's primal. And yet, the opposite of that is that we fear the other. So there's an interesting question about how we would reconcile that.
David, I'm wondering if there have been discussions or projects in NASA to determine a plan on how you would message out to the world if extraterrestrial life or non-human intelligence was discovered. Can you talk a bit about your work at NASA on that?
Yeah, so we've done a lot at NASA in thinking about how to message on this topic. Not specifically about extraterrestrial intelligence, although that enters into the conversation, but now we are at this stage where we are searching the other places in our solar system and exoplanets for some sign of extraterrestrial life. And so we've done a lot of thinking about how do you message about possible biosignatures, because
can you explain biosignature?
Sorry, yeah.
Be specific. What do you mean?
Sure. A biosignature is simply some evidence that suggests the existence of extraterrestrial life. And some examples would be if you find some mixture of gases in the atmosphere of an exoplanet, a planet around another star, that seems to require some biological process to create it. We've gone to Mars and we've looked at rocks, and we found some rocks on Mars that actually have what we call potential biosignatures. There are strange patterns of chemicals. We wouldn't say we've definitely found evidence of ancient life on Mars, but we've found some rocks that seem to have chemistry that is hard to make without ancient life being the explanation. We'd like to examine those rocks more carefully. So we've had a lot of conversations about how do you communicate those kinds of results, because the press, of course, wants to say NASA finds life.
But are they being too conservative, you think, because of fear of that control of the narrative, Nick?
At the moment, you have a lot of conspiracy theorists who believe the government already knows this is true and is covering it up. I don't actually believe that.
Why?
Having
as someone who
for
worked
them,
in government, I would like to know.
I've seen no smoking gun myself. I think there's life out there. I hope there is, because the world would certainly be more interesting if there are NHI, UAP than not. But I don't know it to be a fact.
And yet you said that you do believe it exists.
I do believe it exists.
But what about your work made you get there?
Well, I think we had these things detected across multiple platforms. So it's not just the pilots seeing something, but it's corroboration on conventional radar systems, forward-looking infrared cameras, military satellites, and such.
You will always have rival politicians who will try to exploit whatever situation there is.
We obviously won't be able to control the narrative, but we can still try. And I think we've actually made some progress. We had a series of workshops with scientists and with journalists at NASA, and to talk about this question of how do you communicate about this. And I would say we've had some effect. I mean, again, there's so much you can't control, especially these days with social media. But there was a story that came out last year about this rock called Shavaya Falls that we found on Mars. And we were very careful in our messaging about saying it's a potential biosignature, this, that, and the other thing. And we were gratified that the stories that came out in the press after that, they kind of got it right.
If you had the choice, who would control the narrative? Who would announce that we've found, non-human intelligence or extraterrestrial intelligence? Would it be the journalists from the New York Times? Would it be the government of the US or the UK?
In general, the fact that people have such a hard time believing all of these announcements points to the fact that people aren't, most outlets aren't conveying information accurately. They're not fulfilling the trust that they have. Al Jazeera.
Well, it speaks to the question, the wider question, who speaks for planet Earth? And my answer to that is nobody does. Maybe you should say it is the fairest and most equitable thing that the person who makes the discovery should announce it. But in reality, everyone will probably go at once.
By the way, the SETI community does have what they call a protocol for this, which say an observatory makes a detection that they think is actually a signal. The first thing they do, they don't announce it immediately. They try to get confirmation, and they try to make absolutely sure that what they're seeing is not some false, interference from Earth, some military signal or something, which has happened before. And then once they are convinced it's real, then you tell the world. I mean, that's the protocol. You tell everybody.
That's great. We do also have sort of international organizations that deal with controversial astronomical matters. In particular, the International Astronomical Union, the IAU, that has made controversial decisions before. 20 years ago, the demotion of Pluto from a planet to a dwarf planet. And at the time, this was hotly debated, and there was a lot of pushback from people of all ages, from all countries. But at the same time, the international astronomical community, they were able to reach more or less a consensus. So my hope would be that it would be the International Astronomical Union that would take a lead on there. And it might not be a single statement. It might be a debate.
It's funny you use that example because I think the Pluto debate was handled very badly by the IAU. And there are a lot of us, including myself, in the astronomical community that don't accept that definition of planet that they came up with and the supposed demotion of Pluto. The debate now is, should we be sending out messages? It's called the METI debate, messaging extraterrestrial intelligence. And there's a lot of disagreement about that. People are trying to come up with a new protocol, but there's an argument that, well, if we're listening, we should be sending. It's only fair. There's another argument that says, hold on, we can't speak for Earth, and we don't know 100% that it's safe, because what if we did trigger something?
We cannot not communicate. Right? Because even a lack of communication could be interpreted as a kind of communication. So imagine we had a spacecraft entering the solar system. Even if they were not sending out any radio messages or any light signals, just their presence itself could be interpreted. And sometimes, right, if you're not communicating at all, it can actually sort of make you appear even more suspicious, or potentially even more threatening, compared to if you are sort of very open and you're trying to sort of share as much as you can. So if people at NASA had detected and had really found evidence of extraterrestrial life, I don't think NASA scientists...
It's impossible to keep. Nobody would want to keep it secret.
Exactly.
And if they wanted to, they wouldn't be able to. We used to joke when I was a postdoc at a NASA research center, and there were some stories out there about, NASA's detected extraterrestrial life, but they're keeping it secret. We talked about, hey, if the boss came by and said, hey, we found this thing, but you've got to keep it hush hush. I used to joke with my friends, how long do you think that would remain secret? And the answer was, how long would it take to type it and hit send? There's no way anybody would have any motivation or would obey any command or any ability to keep a secret like that.
And yet, haven't governments kept certain facts secret that would have been called conspiracy a decade ago that have been recognized? Like, for instance, UFOs, UAPs.
Yeah, governments can and do keep secrets all the time. I mean, I think there is a distinction between the civilian scientific community and the world of government.
What I just described is the mindset and ability of the civilian scientific community, not the military.
No, and I agree with you absolutely on that. Now, if government acquired this information first, I think, the extent to which a secret leaks depends on a number of variables, the number of people who are privy to it, but also the penalties, imprisonment, for example, that could come from disclosing classified information.
The government isn't really searching for, it seems to me, it's not searching for intelligent extraterrestrial life. So
but when you say the government isn't searching, the military part of the government, the government also funds us, astrobiology and SETI, to some degree, mostly astrobiology. SETI's more privately funded, actually. But
can you explain astrobiology?
Sure.
Sorry to interrupt. Just really quick.
No problem. Astrobiology is basically the scientific study of life in the universe.
You were saying?
Yeah, I mean, we're not as well funded as the military, let's face it. But so there is a government-funded effort to find extraterrestrial life, including for a long time in the U.S. there was a prohibition on the government funding SETI, this extraterrestrial intelligence. So it was just non-intelligent life. Now NASA's allowed to fund technosignature searches, and so there's some resources being put into looking for intelligent life as well.
I want to hear about technosignatures because I've heard it a few times today. But is what you're talking about including Mars? Because you mentioned Mars earlier. So what's the fascination with Mars?
So there are not currently technosignature searches on Mars, but there are definitely biosignature searches, and it's mostly.
What's the difference? Sorry.
No, so that's fine.
I need you to be specific, please.
Of course, I'm sorry.
No.
Biosignatures are a biosignature would be evidence that's consistent with biology in some other part of the universe. A technosignature it is evidence of technology elsewhere. So it's sort of broader. A signal would be a technosignature, but a technosignature doesn't have to be a signal, if that makes sense.
Which you're not looking for on Mars.
Right. We've discovered enough about Mars to know that in the past it was much more Earth-like. There was liquid water. It was a habitable planet at the time when life was new on Earth. And so given what we've learned about what we think we know about the origin of life on Earth, there should have been an origin of life on Mars. And if there wasn't, that's a really interesting finding too, because it means there's something more unique about Earth than we understand. So we very much want to go and look for ancient life on Mars because finding it would be incredible, and ruling it out would also be really interesting.
So what would that mean to you? Like what if we were alone in the universe? Then what is that? I'm just interested in how do you process that?
I know I won't live to have that knowledge. Because I think, as I said, it would probably take at least centuries to really be able to reach that conclusion. But I suppose it would lead me to a different worldview where there's something really unique and precious. I already feel like there's something unique and precious about Earth, but not in that sense of complex life only existing here.
I'd be rather sad and disappointed myself because I think the universe would be certainly more interesting and possibly even more fun with extraterrestrials, other intelligences.
Yeah, it would also sort of make the question of the origin of life on Earth even more important, right? If life on this planet is truly the only one in the universe, how did it in fact come about, right? How was there a religious origin story that where God or some other kind of like supernatural being, supernatural intelligence at some point started life on Earth?
Can you answer your own question?
If we were alone in the universe, meaning that there is no other extraterrestrial life, then I think nothing would change. We would be where we were like 200 years ago, and it wouldn't really, there wouldn't be a need for this conversation.
Are we potentially dangerous to them?
We are dangerous, potentially dangerous to all life forms on our planet here, so we could also be potentially dangerous to life form elsewhere, whether consciously or unconsciously so, right? So if we decide to not only send sanitized robots to Mars, but if we actually send humans that cannot be completely sanitized, we're not just sending ourselves, we're sending all the microbes, all the bacteria and viruses that live in us and on us. And even if we don't want to hurt any life forms on Mars, but just the microbes, the viruses, the bacteria that we bring with us could potentially have a devastating effect on life elsewhere.
I'm wondering from where you've sat.
Whether humanity could be dangerous to other civilizations? Well, we might, if we encounter other civilizations, there might be ideas that humans have, belief systems, philosophies that are not currently ones that have taken hold in those other civilizations, but which might be very seductive, might take hold, and might do them some harm. There's something, I don't know what it might be, but something to us quite innocuous that they look at us and say, hey, let's do that. And suddenly they're on a path to destruction.
Aren't there already? Yeah, please.
I would also agree on the whole, we as in the scientific community, we have been sort of very careful, let's say, to sanitize any spacecraft, any robots that we send to Mars, for example. Elon Musk sent a Tesla car into the solar system, into an orbit around the sun. And I don't think that Tesla car was as sanitized as, let's say, a NASA spacecraft. And of course...
But it wasn't going anywhere.
It wasn't going anywhere.
Let me give an example.
But the orbit might still change of that object. It is still possible that Tesla spacecraft could still crash into Mars at some point.
He wouldn't like that because doesn't he want to colonize Mars? Isn't that on the table?
Let me circle back. Here's a scenario, though. Let's suppose that we were visited by another civilization and they come here and we don't give them sort of godlike qualities. We figure that if they get here, yes, sure, they're probably more advanced, but not infinitely so. And they come here and their craft gets impacted by a lot of our debris. And then they say to themselves, hey, this planet's got a kind of defensive shield and they've just wiped out. We were coming here to do a peaceful first contact and they've just destroyed our ship because they've got all these particles orbiting at high speed and they've just ripped us up.
Shaykh Hamza, what are the most plausible, unexplainable phenomenon that intrigue you the most, that interest you the most?
I guess I'm intrigued by the unexplained aspects of UFO sightings. I wouldn't want to actually study it myself because I'm apprehensive about studying that realm of existence. But it is something. Jinn. I think it's the jinn are creatures that there's believers among them and there's disbelievers among them.
So you're convinced it's jinn?
I would have to look at it more carefully to reach a conclusive decision, but it looks like that from a distance.
I'm wondering your thoughts on the question I asked Shaykh Hamza, which is, what are the most plausible, unexplained phenomena that interest you the most?
The ones that interest me most are I suppose, UAP data that might indicate, though it's open to interpretation, things like speeds, maneuvers, and accelerations that seem to go beyond the cutting edge of our own aerospace technology. Now, is that a sensor error? Is that something else, like some parallax effect or something, or is it genuine data? I don't know. But of course, some of the whistleblowers have gone much further than that. And some of the whistleblowers have alleged that there are still classified programs somewhere in the US. Well, I don't know that that's true, but if it is true, let's try to find out, because that would be paradigm changing.
What about you?
Well, it would be paradigm changing, but I'm highly skeptical of that because there's never been any evidence produced. Some of this stuff supposedly goes back decades, and there's a history, a verified history of the military the military community spreading false stories about alien technology in order to cover up classified stuff they were doing that was military technology. The famous Roswell incident, where it turns out something did crash. And then the press started telling stories about, this is Roswell, New Mexico, 1947?
47, yeah.
And the press started spreading stories about, this farmer found something that, maybe it was aliens. And the military knew that it wasn't. They knew what it was, that it was some Cold War secret technology that had crashed. But it was convenient for them to say, let's let this alien story spread.
We are at a time where we have an increasing number of satellites in Earth orbit, where we have an increasing number of drones, and we have weather balloons too, like for instance those Chinese weather balloons that can produce a lot of paranoia, right? So we are sort of at a similar moment in time where sort of
but unlike then, now there are literally billions of cell phones with really sophisticated cameras all around the world, and yet where's the evidence?
I hear your skepticism, but what are the most plausible unexplained phenomena that you are most interested in?
There's a famous incident, the Tic Tac incident, which was a aircraft group off of San Diego you probably know the dates better than I.
2004, I think that one was.
In the early 2000s. They saw something, it's called the Tic Tac because of like the little snack thing that was shaped like a big Tic Tac moving in an unusual way. Multiple pilots saw this. I've spoken to one of the pilots. I don't think that she made this up. She was very convinced she had seen it. She didn't know what she had seen. I think it was good faith reporting, and I have no idea what she saw. And to me, it's very mysterious. They had some data that was not kept because their commander said, well, it's not related to our mission, whatever this thing is. And so one of the recommendations that our NASA panel made was keep all the data no matter what, and collect better data. And we also talked to a lot of commercial pilots, and there is a stigma where commercial pilots that have seen things they can't explain are encouraged not to report it because they don't want people to think they're nuts and get grounded.
Shaykh Hamza, bringing us back to the original question, if we were to discover non-human intelligence, extraterrestrial beings, do you think it would humble us, or would it completely shake our sense of self?
If the discovery of intelligent extraterrestrial life humbles us, then that means that before we discovered intelligent extraterrestrial life, we thought a lot about ourselves, right? So to be humbled by the discovery in that way is not, I don't think it paints a good picture of how we're supposed to be. So our humility comes from seeing our own shortcomings and humbling ourselves before God. So the discovery of intelligent extraterrestrial life, would it humble me? I guess it would show the majesty of God, that He's created. He has that the magnificence of His creation extends beyond this earth into the universe, which goes back to, which is like my equivalent of what David is hoping to see, all over the universe.
I would agree with that. Depends on your own sort of attitude, your own personality. If you are used to thinking you're first, you're leading, then seeing somebody else who is first, who is leading, maybe who is more advanced, let's say, a civilization that maybe have conquered death, for instance, or where you have incredibly long lifespan and elimination of disease, poverty, and so on. So if you think if you're used to you thinking that you're first, and then somebody else is ahead of you, that humbles you.
Well, I hope that if we discover intelligent extraterrestrial life, or a non-human intelligence, should I say, that it would teach us to be a little bit more humble, to take a broader perspective. It might, and I know this is very kind of cliched and soundbitey, but it might teach us that as humans, there is more that binds us together than sets us apart.
It's always interesting to have different people in a room and hear everybody's perspectives and learn from them. So I think like if you had an alien in the room, it would enrich the conversation.
Final question. I'll start with you, Sheikh Hamza. If humanity is not alone, what responsibility does that place on us moving forward?
So if there is intelligent extraterrestrial life, then it's our responsibility to reach out to them, to get to know them, to discover them, and to communicate with them and to convey the message of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ to them and have conversations with them, learn their perspectives, learn their language, learn their culture. Yeah.
Matthias?
Yeah, I think it would be the responsibility on all of us to be just as open-minded as we can, maybe as open-minded as we've never been before, towards that sort of other culture, perhaps that other technology, that other biology as well. So we should essentially tear down all the sort of walls that we have in our head in order sort of to make room for all that sort of is possible when you are in touch with another civilization from another planet.
David?
I think that it would present an opportunity and a responsibility to enlarge our sense of community, to learn as much as we could about them and from them. And even if we can't learn anything specific from them by communicating, I think just the knowledge of their existence would be a tremendous learning experience. And I'd like to think that it would help us confront the notion that we have a responsibility and again an opportunity to survive, and that means solving our problems here on Earth and sort of rising to that occasion of becoming part of a galactic community.
Nick?
I think with any defining moment in human history, there are threats and opportunities. The nearest analogy I can think of to discovering that we're not alone, something that came suddenly and unexpectedly from left field and changed all our lives, is COVID. So I think in relation to discovering that we're not alone in the universe, the responsibility that we have is not repeating the mistakes of COVID. Let's not make it political. Let's not shout at each other. I like David's point that this is an opportunity. And although there are threats and opportunities, let's focus on the opportunity. Let's talk to each other. Let's be humble. And rather than trying to force our views on other people or shout other viewpoints down, let's listen to each other and let's try to learn something.
Thank you all so much. That was a really interesting conversation. It's going to stay with me for a while. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
You've been a great
for
moderator.
joining us. Thank you.
Wonderful question.
Thank you so much. You've been great guests.